Gather information, fight off horrible frog monsters, stave off impending doom. It's the Hellboy board game. The Hellboy board game is a cooperative scenario-based adventure combat game. Players take the role of members of the Bureau of Paranormal Research and Defense, like Hellboy or Abe Sapien. Each scenario uses a small deck of case file cards to drive the narrative. The cards are meant to be hidden until revealed through certain in-game effects, so the players won't know what twists and turns are coming until they're already upon them, ultimately culminating in the huge boss battle at the end of each case file. Each round of Hellboy is broken down into 5 phases: enemy, agent, rest, doom, and end phases. And they're all pretty self-explanatory. This is jumping ahead a little bit, but whenever a player uses the Explore action to open up a new room, an encounter card is flipped to reveal which monsters, clue tokens, and scenery pieces are added to the map. Either way, the encounter cards will show what type of monster is being spawned. The setup instructions for each scenario will tell the players how to set up the enemy track on the HQ board. So Minion A on the encounter card refers to the enemy card in slot A on the HQ board. Each monster card will have stats, keywords, and special abilities. What's neat about the enemy keywords is they control the attitude of the monster itself. Brawlers move towards the closest agent, while cowards move as far away as they can. This simple mechanic makes each monster type feel really unique in terms of how they must be dealt with. Some you have to chase down, and some will be chasing you. Each time an enemy activates, it'll move within accordance to one of those keywords, and it'll attack if it can. Each enemy deals a flat amount of damage, but that damage can be resisted by a skill defense test, which we'll get to in a minute. Any damage taken by players is gained as damage tokens. These tokens fill up the agent's injury track until it is full. When that happens, any further damage causes the leftmost damage token to flip into an injury, which will hinder the agent's skill test, which, again, I promise we'll get to very soon. If an agent's damage track is full of injuries, they are knocked out temporarily until the players can take the rest action, which happens after the player phase. But during the player phase, each agent has 3 actions they can take per round, which are noted by the colored action cubes that they each will have. But a really neat feature of the Hellboy board game is the lack of player turns. Rather than the typical you go, I go, the Hellboy board game allows players to take their actions in any order they want. Hellboy could take an action or 2, and then Abe could do something, then Hellboy could act again. This allows for a lot more tactics on how the players will engage with the current threats, and gives an almost real-time strategy kind of vibe, without the stress of actual real-time elements. There are several basic actions each agent can take, like move, shoot, fight, and a few others. But each agent also has their own unique actions, as well as unique abilities and starting equipment. But regardless of the action being made, most will require a test in order to succeed, most commonly when attacking an enemy. Each agent has their skills listed at the top of their character board, and these are fight, shoot, explore, and defend. The colors of each of these icons indicate which dice are rolled when making that skill test. When making a skill test, the player rolls the 3 skill dice of the indicated color and the blue effect die, which adds a little chaos to the roll. The number of pips on each die result show how successful the skill test was. For attacks, for example, the number of successes is checked against the enemy's resilience to determine how much damage was dealt. But for something like an examine skill test, the gradient of success is based on the results of the dice itself, as detailed in the action's description. Some game effects will also upgrade or downgrade a die, like the player's option to spend additional action cube to boost the test, or an agent's assisting one another, both of which will upgrade one die. The dice are ranked yellow, orange, red, then black, from worst to best. The higher ranked dice have a much higher chance of success, but also higher results on each die face. So, upgrading and downgrading a die is a significant swing. Then, the blue effect die has 6 different faces, each with their own effect. Either adding 1 success or 2 successes to the roll, allowing a reroll of any number of the other test die, doubling the value of one other result, or the catastrophe result, which not only discards the highest scoring die, but often triggers some other in-game effects whenever it's rolled. Finally, the BPRD symbol, which is a wild card and lets the players choose whichever result they'd like. Once all agents have taken their 3 actions, they move into the rest phase. This is where they are given the option of taking time. But they can only do this if there are no enemies anywhere on the board. When the players take time, they can each take 1 rest action, move freely around the board, and freely trade items with each other. But each time they do this, the Impending Doom track also moves forward. There are 2 important tracks players will have to manage while playing Hellboy the board game, the Impending Doom track and the Information Gathered track. Players can progress the Information Gathered track by using the Examine action while in the same area as a clue token. During the setup of the game, insight markers are placed on this track, and each time the Information Gathered marker reaches one of these insight tokens, it is collected. These insight tokens are utilized in different ways depending on the scenario. For example, in the tutorial scenario, each insight collected represents the players discovering some weakness within the boss, and allows players to spend that token to upgrade a die during the boss fight. The other track to note is the Impending Doom track. Like the Information track, during setup, a trigger marker is placed on a specific space on the Impending Doom track, and when it is reached, some in-game effect occurs, as dictated by the case file cards. But usually it starts the final confrontation with the boss. One of the main ways the Impending Doom track moves forward is during the 4th phase of the round, the Doom phase. In the Doom phase, players flip over the top card of the Doom deck, which is custom built for each scenario. The case file card will show which icons of cards are added to the Doom deck. These cards will often progress the Impending Doom track, but will also have some other effects as well, sometimes even singling out one specific agent. With the Doom phase resolved, the End phase begins, and it's just refreshing action cubes and dealing with frog swarms and fires, which we didn't really get into, but trust me, they're bad. Once the players reach the final confrontation and encounter the boss, a few things happen. The HQ board is flipped over, and the boss deck is set up. But, essentially, the game continues as normal, except now there's the boss. Rather than typical minion activation, the boss uses the boss deck to determine its behavior. It might move, or attack, or summon more minions, or some other weird and wacky effects. The game ends when either all the enemies are defeated, or all the agents are knocked out. And that's the basic rundown of the Hellboy board game. There are a bunch of other mechanics we didn't get to touch on, like equipment cards, target priority, special attacks, calling for backup, the special scenery effects, buying upgrades between missions, and that's not even bringing up mention of the many expansions this game has. As of when I'm recording this, there are about a dozen full expansions and a few smaller character expansions as well. Each one adds new case files, monsters, mechanics, and tons of additional gameplay. So if all that sounds interesting, please go check out Hellboy the board game and its many expansions. If this game sounds good, but you want a little more focus on the overarching campaign aspect, you should definitely check out our coverage on the Resident Evil 3 board game. It's a similar game with a lot of the same core mechanics, but has a really developed campaign system which integrates perfectly with the rest of the game. So check that out right here. I'm Matt with Bowles. Thanks for watching. Bye.